Okay, everybody ready? Well, I'm very pleased to be here to personally get a sense of the tremendous work that is being done to deal with the flooding situation in this particular part of Canada. And as we all know, floods are a very painful reality in many places across the country this spring. But I'm joined by Mayor Watson and Mayor Desjardins, Councillor Blais, Francis Drouin, the Member of Parliament, Conrad Sauvé, the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Red Cross. My purpose today has been to give myself a sense of personal familiarity with just exactly what all of the response organizations have been dealing with in fighting these floods, and to say thank you to the teams on the ground, the provincial officials, the municipal officials, the representatives of a great many federal organizations, including particularly the Canadian Armed Forces, together with local volunteers and also volunteers who have come from a long way away to just respond to the call and be helpful to their neighbors, whether they're across the street, across town, or across the province or in another province. There's been a tremendous outpouring of very determined effort by Canadians to say they care and they want to help and they want to be involved in the solutions. In the four provinces, just a quick summary, in Manitoba, where we actually expected the largest flooding problem this year, there has been flooding on the Red River between Emerson and Winnipeg, and there are people certainly affected, and there are some evacuations, but not nearly the level that had been experienced in the past or nearly the level that we had been expecting. The situation is stable. There was no request for federal assistance from Manitoba to deal with the situation in that province. In New Brunswick, where the situation was very severe, and there are literally thousands of properties that have been affected from north of Fredericton to St. John. The situation has passed through Fredericton. The watercrest is moving towards St. John, but the situation is steadily improving. It's stable, not getting any worse, and the situation is under control and getting better. The provinces of Ontario and Quebec are where the major challenge continues. The forecast for water flow is that the Ottawa River will continue to rise for perhaps another day. We should see the crest on one side of Ottawa and then the other side of Ottawa within the next day or two, and then it should not get any worse beyond that. Maybe another 3, 4, 5 centimeters on top of what is there now in terms of water levels. But then it should stabilize. It will not immediately subside, but it won't get any worse. It should stabilize relatively high levels for another week, and then we should see the subsidence after that. So the need for vigilance and effort is going to continue, certainly in the next 24 to 48 hours, while the risk of a further rise of a few centimeters is there. But even in that period after that, for the week, as the water levels stabilize and begin to subside, there'll still be very high water levels, and they are dangerous and they cause damage. And the fighting of that flood in these areas is going to have to continue through that period of time, and all of this, of course, depends on no further precipitation of any consequence. It's the forecast is reasonably good in that regard, but if that should change and we get another downpour, it will make a big difference. In terms of the federal response to this, as you know, the leadership is provided locally by municipalities, and Mayor Desjardins and Mayor Watson in their respective jurisdictions, and their counterparts in other municipalities all along the water flow. They have been remarkable, and all of their local municipal agencies have worked very, very hard to respond, to provide immediate emergency response, and then all the support services that go with that to make sure that people can continue functioning with their lives as normal as possible. Provincial officials have provided a very strong leadership and cooperation and collaboration. It's when the province determines that a situation is beyond local capacity to cope with it, that they make a formal request to the Government of Canada. And there have been requests from both the province of Ontario and the province of Quebec for federal responses, and we've responded to those requests. Most especially with the Canadian Armed Forces. There are about 1,000 members of the Canadian Armed Forces that have been deployed in Ontario, and another 1,000 that have been deployed various locations across Quebec. And the response that I heard today from people in these local communities when the Canadian Army turns up with all of their expertise and their strength to assist local people in fending off these crisis situations, there's an enormous sense of relief and reassurance that we're going to get through this. Everybody's putting their shoulder to the wheel, and the work of the Canadian Armed Forces has been very, very well received. Primarily in the sandbagging effort, but also in helping to communicate with people to make sure that they're doing house checks and that people are safe. And logistics and transportation are also great strengths of the Canadian Forces. So they've worked very hard to deliver all of those things and to be of maximum assistance. I would also note that beyond that, the federal effort is coordinated by an agency in my department called the Government Operations Centre that communicates not just with the federal collection of authorities, but also with provinces and municipalities to make sure that everybody is fully in the loop and everybody knows what they need to know to pull off the response efforts. Environment Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Transport Canada, the Coast Guard, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Public Services and Procurement, Revenue Canada, Shared Services, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, all of them have been providing services and support to make sure that we get through this in the best possible way. Right now, there's a particular emphasis on protecting critical infrastructure to make sure that power systems, water systems, transportation systems, communication systems are all properly functioning, and if there is a threat or a risk that's created by the flooding water, then obviously the right mitigation steps are taken to make sure that infrastructure stays sound and secure. And there will be now an increasing focus on dealing with the people who have been dislocated. The municipalities provide support and assistance in that regard, as do provincial authorities. The Red Cross is obviously a critical agency, an auxiliary to government in these circumstances, making sure people are properly taken care of and kept track of when they've been dislocated from their homes. One message from the Red Cross is for everybody who has been dislocated to make sure that they're registered with the Red Cross. It may not seem to be, to some, an important thing to do now, but we're not out of the woods yet. There's a period of time left to go, and then the long recovery time thereafter. And it's important to know everybody that's been affected. So if people in the flooding areas have not yet registered with the Red Cross, it would be a very good idea to make sure that they are registered so that their needs and requirements can be properly tracked. I just want to say a very sincere thank you. Beyond the governmental and the official agencies, all of whom have been really terrific in dealing with this situation, but beyond them, to the community volunteers that have been truly extraordinary. The Mennonite group that came in to assist, the Mennonite disaster team, the Rubicon team, others that perhaps are unknown or unmentioned, they are certainly not unappreciated. That community spirit, whether it came from across the street or from another province or a different part of the country, it's been extraordinary, and it demonstrates the very best of Canadians. When there's a disaster, a problem, we try very hard to have each other's backs and to do what's necessary to keep people safe and secure. And to all of those who have participated in any way, a very sincere thank you. We're not done yet. There's more work that will have to be done in the weeks and months ahead to make sure that we properly recover from this situation. Now, could I ask the two mayors if they have comments to make? Mayor Watson or Mayor Desjardins?
Sure.
Let me just get out of your way here.
Alors, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre, pour votre présence ici aujourd'hui. Thank you for your presence. You're quite right. The peak, we believe, is going to take place, excuse me, in the West End later today, and we anticipate the peak we're going to see the peak here in the East End tomorrow, although Councillor Blais tells me that some residents have actually measured the water's gone down a little bit just in the last 24 hours, which is good news. I just want to formally thank you, Minister, and the federal government for the presence of the Canadian Armed Forces. We have about 700 troops now in Ottawa, in all parts of the city. They have been a great help, not only physically, but emotionally, because of the boost that they have given to our residents. Et certainement, c'est une occasion pour moi de dire merci beaucoup à tous les bénévoles. On avait, je pense que c'est 15 000 bénévoles qui travaillent sur ce projet pendant les dernières 2 semaines. And the volunteers have been working their hearts out, and we couldn't really have saved the number of houses we've saved without those volunteers working hand in hand with our officials, first responders, as well as the Canadian Armed Forces. So, the challenge we have is that the peak is still not here, and then, as the Minister said, if it starts raining again, that pushes our forecasts off, but we anticipate there's going to be some good weather this weekend. But I'm going to encourage people to be prepared as we ask for your help in the weeks ahead, because the cleanup of these sites is going to be a tremendous challenge for the residents. You know, you've seen on properties, people have seen swing sets and benches and picnic tables and lumber, all contaminated because of the septic systems, and we're going to need a lot of help in the weeks ahead. So while we appreciate what those great volunteers have done now, we're going to have to require on the goodwill of the people of Ottawa and from around Eastern Ontario to help us again. So thank you, Minister, very, very much. Thanks to Frank, and my colleague Steve's been working, I think, 24 hours a day on this project. And Conrad, the Red Cross, obviously continues to play an important role, and we look forward to your continued support. And now, Monsieur le Maire de Clarence Rockland.
Je veux seulement répéter ce que M. Watson a dit pour le ministre. Je remercie tout le monde. Dimanche, on a eu l'armée une journée, mais je veux vous dire qu'on avait 2 armées. Une armée de volontaires, une armée de l'armée canadienne. Et puis l'armée canadienne nous a donné de l'aide qu'on avait vraiment besoin. Même des résidents qui m'ont dit ils sont venus dans le bon temps. Alors, I'd like to say thank you. Businesses that supplied food to us and all this. It's amazing. It's a beautiful experience if you don't consider the disaster we've had. The experience of having all the volunteers, having the businesses that come out and help us bring free food. It's amazing. So thank you very much to all. And the provincial government also. That Minister Clark phoned me yesterday. I was talking to Premier Ford last week, and they're all offering to have some help for us, so we can only hope, because really it's, you can see as I told the minister, this is the color of my budget this morning, that's why I've got that tie. And it's a very costly operation. Last time we had 125,000 bags to clean up. This time we've got 250. It cost $350,000 to clean up. Now it's double. So we don't have those resources. We're a small municipality, so we're hoping for help, and I think it's been promised pretty well everywhere. Merci beaucoup.
Et maintenant, Francis, en français.
Juste en français pour répéter un peu ce que le ministre a dit. Le but de la visite aujourd'hui, c'était évidemment de venir voir ce qui se passe sur le terrain et de dire merci aux intervenants, donc les municipalités qui ont fait un travail excellent, le maire Watson, le conseiller Blais et le maire de Clarence Rockland, et j'ai d'autres maires aussi dans l'Est ontarien qui ont fait un excellent travail. Évidemment, ils ont beaucoup plus de pratiques. Ce n'est pas une pratique qu'on veut, mais c'est une réalité qu'on fait face aujourd'hui. Et on tient à remercier aussi les forces armées, l'armée de bénévoles, comme le maire Desjardins a dit. C'est incroyable que ce soit à Cumberland, à Constance Bay ou dans l'Est ontarien, chez nous à Rockland. On l'apprécie beaucoup et je pense que les gens sur le terrain l'ont ressenti. Et nous, à Clarence Rockland, on a eu l'armée une journée et je peux vous dire que les gens étaient très appréciés parce que quand ça fait une semaine qu'on est sur le terrain et ça fait une semaine qu'on se bat contre l'eau, quand on a du renfort comme ça, c'est très apprécié. C'est non seulement apprécié pour le moral, mais pour aussi le travail physique qu'ils ont rendu. L'autre chose aussi, c'est qu'on s'attend à ce que le niveau d'eau maximum atteindre son niveau d'eau maximum d'ici 24 heures ou 48 heures. Donc, on dit aux gens de s'attendre, de continuer à travailler et ça va prendre encore plus de bénévoles. Et on verra si tout va bien d'ici une semaine, l'eau va rester au même niveau, évidemment, s'il n'y a pas de précipitation. Alors, encore une fois, je tiens à remercier le ministre d'avoir venu prendre le temps de venir visiter nos communautés et encore une fois, les municipalités et la province d'être là pour nos concitoyens. Merci.
Conrad Sylvie is the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Red Cross.
Je pense que, comme les maires l'ont mentionné et le ministre, en fait, la Croix-Rouge est présente en ce moment à supporter les différentes villes. Près de 9000 personnes se sont inscrites auprès de la Croix-Rouge dans les 3 provinces qui sont affectées. On est dans la phase, évidemment, de l'urgence encore, mais la phase de retour à la maison, de rétablissement aussi, va être un enjeu important. Donc, on rappelle aux gens de s'inscrire. Les besoins sont à venir. On va travailler de près avec les municipalités au niveau des services les plus vulnérables. As the minister and the mayors have mentioned, I think this is of course, the emergency phase. There's going to be a recovery phase, a return home. There's going to be needs in the weeks and the months ahead. Remind everybody to register with the Red Cross. We'll be following closely and working closely with the municipalities in terms of helping the needs of the most vulnerable in this situation.
Councillor Blais?
Well, thank you very much, Minister, for coming this morning. Francis, Mr. Mayor, the presence of the Canadian Armed Forces in the community can't be understated. They've lifted the morale of residents and they've done an amazing job preparing for the various phases of the flooding. And in Cumberland, we've had the pleasure of having reservists stay in our community, and it goes to show that the fortitude of the Canadian public to participate in the Reserve Army on 24 hours notice to leave their lives and come to a community such as Cumberland to help out is just absolutely amazing, and I want to thank the federal government again for their support.
Okay. Any questions?
You're going to invest billions of dollars on the infrastructure, hoping to make it more resilient against climate change. Can you tell us exactly what the government is planning to do? New dikes, maybe better technology to predict the water? What are we going to do in Ottawa with that money?
It's quite frankly all of the above. The program that we have established is the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. It is part of the $180 billion that the Government of Canada will be investing in various forms of infrastructure over the course of the next decade. And a portion of that has been specifically identified, $2 billion to start with, $2 billion for infrastructure related to the consequences of climate change. And how can we make our communities and our society and our economy more resilient to the consequences of climate change. Primarily that means dealing better with water or dealing better with fires, because it's storms, floods, droughts, and wildfires that cause the big damages. Part of that may well be in investments in a better capacity to understand and predict water flows. That is done in many ways across the country now, but we need a more coherent and comprehensive system for anticipating where the flows will be. We need a better capacity to map flood-prone zones. We've got a specific program right now that's helping municipalities and provinces to do that. The federal government has published guidelines for floodplain mapping, and we've provided $200 million specifically for that component of the exercise. But we need to understand in advance, if you get 2 inches of moisture, what happens to the water? If you get 5, if you get 10, if you get 20, all in the space of a couple of days, where does the water go, and what are the consequences of that? Who gets flooded and who doesn't? That will lead to decision making at the municipal and provincial level about zoning laws and regulations. And one of the very clear lessons from this year and 2 years ago, and if you think back far enough, the High River Calgary flood in 2013, when you're building back after disasters like that, do you build back just the same old way in the same old place, or do you change the zoning requirements to say we're just not going to do that again? And if you make that decision, then what are the consequences for people who have properties in those areas? It also means physical infrastructure, like dikes and dams and levees and burns and other engineered ways to control water flows and protect property, direct water in ways that will be less damaging. But all of these things have to be a combination of the solution that we're looking for. It will take federal effort, provincial effort, municipal effort. It will take private sector engagement as well. We're working with the insurance industry to get a better system of insurance coverage at commercial rates to cover more effectively overland flooding, which is a very difficult thing to get an insurance policy to cover. Overland flooding in about 15% of the most difficult damaging cases. There's insurance you can buy now that'll cover 85% of the losses that you will likely experience. It's that last 15% that is very difficult and very expensive, and we're looking at models around the world with the insurance industry that may involve forms of co-insurance to make sure that the private insurance coverage is as broad as it can be. But all of these things have to be part of the solution. Conversations have already started among federal and provincial and territorial ministers responsible for emergency management. And out of those conversations, we've got the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, the $2 billion. We've got the flood mapping program as part of that. But there's much more that we're going to have to do to make our country resilient to climate change. People 2 years ago thought that was the flood of 100 years, and it's back again in just 2 years. We have to prepare for that reality, and it's better to prepare in advance than just cleaning up the mess after the fact. Yes, sir.
Sir, I'm sure the two mayors there are thinking about the same question. Is there any money that you can give them to cover the costs that we have incurred after these?
That's exactly what the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund is for, to prepare our infrastructure and our communities to be more resilient and better able to cope in advance before it happens another time. In terms of cleaning up the immediate mess from this circumstance, there's an established cost-sharing formula, the Disaster Mitigation, the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement, DFAA. It's been there for 40 years. It lays out a formula in advance for how the Government of Canada will assist to clean up the costs and the losses after the fact. The first $3 or so per capita is the responsibility of the province, and then as the cost rises above that level, the federal share rises. It starts at 25, goes to 50, goes to 75. Ultimately, if the losses are large enough, the federal share would be 90%.
Are the cities on the hook for the army, for instance?
No, Minister Sajjan has made it very clear that while the Canadian Armed Forces are entitled under the formula to reclaim their costs and to be compensated, they haven't done so at any point in the last decade, and they have no intention of sending anyone a bill this time either.
Any estimation of costs in total about how much this is going to hurt the economy, both not just here in Ontario, but Quebec as well, New Brunswick, even potentially Manitoba?
At this stage, that's just not knowable. We'll be doing all the calculations with the provinces in the weeks and months ahead to make sure that we've calculated everything in. But it's going to be a big number. The flood in High River in Alberta in 2013 was the biggest, most expensive flood in Canadian history. This one is not of that order of magnitude, but it is hitting the flooding conditions, hitting 4 different provinces. So it will be a very significant number when it's all over and done with. And it makes so much more sense to try to prepare yourself in advance, make the investments up front to head off the losses, rather than just letting it happen again and clean up the mess after the fact.
You're talking about
is that going to be a big cost then, the mitigation or the prevention of this happening again? Is that an even bigger cost than the cleanup from this?
The cleaning up after the fact is always more expensive than investing in mitigation and adaptation measures going in. We will ultimately, over the long term, save money by investing upfront in the new technologies, in the better infrastructure, in the more effective insurance schemes and so forth. Investing in that upfront will save us money from the disaster financial assistance arrangement. At the end of the day, it'll be cheaper if you're properly prepared.
So far from what you've seen, is it going to be more costly than in 2017, the damage?
I really wouldn't want to speculate about that, but the water levels are in this area are higher than they were in 2017. So one would assume that if there's more water flowing through, that the consequences will be larger. But the response this time was faster. The coordination was better. We learned from the experiences of previous years. And many people in the communities have said they had a greater sense of being better prepared. Depressed, obviously, that was happening again in 2 years, but a sense that things were going better. The response was more effective. It got started quicker and so forth. So there may be some puts and takes. You lose on one side, you gain on the other. But we'll leave it to the officials to do the actual calculation. But there will be very significant losses that will undoubtedly trigger the DFAA.
Jen Landry took you on a tour of her water dam, just to show. What did you think of it, and the fact that sandbags this time they're just not enough?
Well, obviously, having had the experience of a couple of years ago, she wasn't going to run that risk again. And took some very important private initiatives on her own to make the investment in the bladder system, and it has proven to be obviously not a perfect solution. You have to patch in certain places, but a very effective measure, and that is simply smart, proactive home protection and private initiative taken by a particular homeowner that was determined to do as much as she possibly could to protect herself and her property. It was a very wise decision on her part, and congratulations to all the neighbors that are cooperating to make it as effective as it can be.
Touring around this morning, what were you hearing from some of the affected neighborhoods? Anything that they need or was it just, you know, they're doing okay? What do you think?
There was certainly a very large sense of relief and appreciation about the presence of the Canadian Armed Forces. We just heard that everywhere, where people were very, very pleased to have the assistance of the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Forces. You can tell people are weary. They've been fighting this now for day after day after day, and when it's your livelihood and your property and your home and all your treasured memories that are at stake, it's a very threatening, high anxiety situation. So people are tired, and there's some frustration as a result of that. But I didn't get any sense of resignation or giving up or defeatism. People are going to fight this, and they're going to win. And a lot of friends and neighbors and volunteers are turning up to help, and all three levels of government are collaborating very effectively together to make sure that the official response is strong and solid. I think what people need to be prepared for is one thing that Conrad mentioned. We're about, we hope, to get to the peak, and so this situation is not going to get any worse. But getting better will take a significant length of time. It won't happen instantly. It's not like flipping a switch, oh hooray, the flood is over and tomorrow will be normal. It will take time to recover and time to rebuild, and people are going to need the patience to get through that, and the support systems to get through that. That's what the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement is for. That's what the Red Cross does so very well. And as Conrad points out, in all the official programming that the provincial government will bring forward and the federal government will help to pay for, there will still be gaps. There will still be circumstances that aren't covered by the official government programs. And that's where the auxiliary services of the Red Cross are so important and will be increasingly important during the recovery stage. So everybody should remember, register with the Red Cross so they can keep track of you. Pardon me, what?
What will the recovery look like in light of the high water levels?
Well, that will depend on the lessons that we learn from all of that. The recovery itself will take a while to get started, because those high water levels will stay about where they are, maybe a little bit less for another week, assuming no more significant precipitation. So there's going to be this delay time before people can actually get back in and do the things that they so desperately want to do, because it's their home and their private property. Support services provided by the municipalities, the mental health services that are important, the counseling services, the help that's provided by the various agencies that work with and through the Red Cross, all of that is going to be critical to make sure people have the fortitude and the reinforcement to cope with a problem that was bad enough and dangerous and damaging enough while it was getting worse every day. But sadly, in the response to a flood, it doesn't get better instantaneously, and that will make the relief and recovery effort more protracted than people would want. But you can't make the water go away any faster, sadly. Okay.
Thank you. Other CT? Yeah,
Excuse me.
Oh, I was like...
Somebody just pick up a phone there?
Oh yeah, she has a phone.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, sure.